In this video, we will learn how to read the keyboard input in Java using the scanner class. So far, we learned about Java API, the primitive data types Java supports, and the string class. We also learned how to use Java API to instruct the computer to print to the screen, using the class system, object out, and the methods print or print line. In many of your programs, you will want to read the input from the user. You want to take the data, process it, and print useful output after solving a problem. To do so, we need to read the standard input, which is the user's keyboard, to take the inputs. The inputs could be any of the data types we learned about: numbers, characters, Boolean, or strings. By learning how to do that in this video, we will be ready to write fully interactive programs that can read inputs, store and process data, and print output to the user. So how would we do that? The first question that probably should come to mind is, does Java have a system.in similar to the system.out that we can use to read the inputs? Java actually does have a system.in. However, it's not as straightforward or as simple as the system.out. The problem with the system.in is that it reads 1 byte for the ASCII at a time. Let's see how that works. In this code, I used the read method from system.in to read an integer, which I will store in the int variable b. Then I try to print the b to see what Java read. After running the code, I enter 15 as an input, but then the print line statement prints 49 instead of 15. Where did this 49 come from? You probably guessed it right. The 49 is the equivalent to the ASCII code of the number 1. So, as you can see, system.in is very limited. It reads 1 byte, which is a single character from the whatever input we enter. This will not be very useful when you build an application that reads the user's names as strings, phone number, age, height, and so on. So clearly we want to boost the capability of system.in to read or scan a whole input instead of just single byte. This can be done by using a scanner object, an object that comes from the scanner class specialized in reading the user's input. Using the scanner class is most likely the simplest way to read the input in Java, but you should be aware that there are other ways. Alright, so how does that work? Remember, we said that Java comes with an API that has several packages, and each package has a set of classes that can be used. 2 of these packages are lang for the Java language and util for utility. The lang package is the Java language package. It contains the system and math classes that we have already used so far. The util package is the utility package, which has several useful classes such as the scanner. As you sit and work in your program, you have your own workspace. To help you, Java automatically brings the lang package to your workspace, and that's why we were able to use system and math classes easily. This is not the case, however, when it comes to the scanner class, which we need to use to create the scanner object, which in turn will help us boost the performance of system.in and help us scan the input. You have to manually bring the scanner class to your workspace to use it. The way to do that is to tell Java to import from Java's utility package the scanner class. So you say import java.util.scanner. What that does is that it brings the class and have it ready for you to use. Now we can use it, and we can create our new scanner object using the new keyword, just as we did with the string class before. So now let's analyze this line and understand how it works. Once again, back to our stack memory. When you declare a scanner reference variable by using scanner keyboard, it's going to create a scanner reference variable in the stack memory and name it keyboard. Remember, we said this is a reference variable because it's going to be used to point or reference an object in the heap memory. Now the new scanner system.in part will create a scanner object in the heap memory and configure it to work with the system.in. Once you do the assignment using the equal sign, the reference variable keyboard will hold the memory location reference for the scanner object in the heap memory. Now, the keyboard reference variable is referencing the scanner object. Alright, so let's focus on what this scanner object can do for us. The scanner object has several methods that can read most of the data types that we talked about. To read a string, we use the method called nextLine. To read a double, we use the nextDouble method. Similarly, for the float, we use the nextFloat method. Same for the long, int, short, byte, and boolean. Notice that all of these methods have the next followed by the capitalized data type name. So one way to use these methods is to use the keyboard scanner object to read the input and store the read data in the variables of the same type. Now what about the char? How can we read the char? Well, the scanner object doesn't have a method to read the character. Instead, what we will do is to read the input as a string and then use the char add method to extract the character from that string. So for example, here we declare a string called input and a char named answer. Then we initialize a scanner object called keyboard and link it to the system.n. Then we prompt the user with a system.out.print statement to answer with a letter y or n for yes or no respectively. Now we read the user's keyboard as a string using the nextLine method and make input reference variable point at that read string. Notice that the string we just read is basically a string with a single character y or n. Then what we do is to use the char add method to extract that character from the string. Since we have one character, we use the char add 0 to extract the first character of the string, which will be the y or n. The last thing we want to discuss before we start writing codes to read keyboard inputs is that you have to be careful when mixing the data types that you read. What we mean by mixing data types is when you write a program to read data from the user, you ask for a mix of strings and numbers, for example, age, height, and so on. As the user inputs the data, his keystrokes are stored in the keyboard buffer in the memory before the computer processes it. After the user is done with typing, they hit the enter key, which is also stored in the keyboard buffer. For example, you can input 36 followed by an enter. When you use a scanner method to read the 36, what it does is that it reads the 36 and leaves the new line character behind. Now assume you follow that with a new line method to read a string from the user after prompting him for example, the name. What will happen is that the next line method will get confused, think that the new line character that is left behind is the actual input, and it's going to read it and leave. So this way, it's going to terminate before the user gets a chance to enter his actual name. So let's see this in another example and learn how to fix it. You prompt the user for the salary. After the user finishes entering the numbers, you read the input as a primitive double using the nextDouble method. The new line character is left behind in the keyboard buffer. Now you go and prompt the user for the name, which is a non-primitive string. The next line reads the new character, which is stored as an empty string, and terminates. This is a problem, and you will not be able to get the name of the user. So let's restart this scenario and try to fix this problem. You go and prompt the user again and follow the steps all the way until you have the keyboard buffer with a new line character left behind. So what you want to do before you prompt the user for the name is to get rid of this new line character before you move forward. This can be done by simply using a dummy nextLine method to read and exhaust this new line character. Notice that we say it's dummy because we don't make any reference variable reference it. Now you are ready to read a string, and since the keyboard buffer is empty, the user can actually enter their name followed by an enter. You read the buffer and store the name in the string object referenced by the name reference variable. So remember, this problem happens when you read a primitive data type and then try to read a string, which is a non-primitive data type. This is a demo of how to read the keyboard input from the user using the scanner class. The first demo is the one that we had in the video, which shows that system.n doesn't work. System.n doesn't work because it reads a single byte, and that's why if you try to enter multiple inputs, which is the case for any number that you enter or a string, what it will do is that it will extract single character of your input. So for example, here if I enter an integer that is, let's say 35, it's going to extract 3 and just print it in a very crude way that is just the 51 equivalent ASCII code of 3. So that's clearly not very useful, and we cannot use it to read multiple inputs from the user and use it properly for our code. So what we want to do is to use the scanner class. The scanner class can be used by importing it first, so we can use it. And this way we can go and create a scanner object, and we can call it keyboard. Notice here that keyboard is not the only name. It's a reference variable, and it can take any identifier. So I could just call it, for example, KB if I want to. All right, that's completely up to you. Don't feel restricted of using keyboard. It doesn't have to be. All right, so for example, here I'm going to read an input, which is an integer, using the scanner class keyboard that I just created. And what I'm going to do is that I declare a number, prompt the user for an integer, and then I'm going to use the next int method, right, from the keyboard object to read an integer and store that integer in the number variable. All right, so if I run this, it's prompting me enter an integer value, which is this system.out.print statement. So here I can go and say, for example, 82. And then it's going to take that input here using next int, store it in number. Number is going to be printed in that system.out.print statement, which will give me this. So it's working. It's much better than system.n alone. So this way, the scanner helped improve the performance of system.n, and now it can scan the whole input. All right, so the next one I'm going to do is to read a Boolean. So it has many methods, very useful scanner class and objects. So we can actually use it to read a Boolean. So I am enjoying this class, false. So it's reading, you are enjoying this class, false. So now it reads a Boolean data type. All right, so that's very handy and nice. Reading a string. So now you can actually read a string. So here I can go prompt. So this to read a string. So I create a reference variable called name. It's of a string type. Then I prompt the user for the name, and then I go and read the string using the next line method. All right, so there is no next string method. This is a very common mistake that people do, because everything is next end, next double, next Boolean. So people think like, okay, then it's next string. No, it's not. It's next line. It reads the line. All right, whatever that is. And then the next line can be here stored as, it's not going to be stored. It's going to be an object, of course, and referenced by the name. All right. And then I try to print that by using the system.out.print. Now notice here that that's why I'm saying next line, it's not just next string, because I could enter a number as my name, right? And that's fine. It's going to treat that number as a string, right? Not an integer, not a double. So that's why it's next line. It treats the whole line as a string, whatever that is. Like you could put whatever you want there, all right? So I could put like Hamza, and it's going to read Hamza as a string. All right, now how to read a character. As we said, Java or the scanner class doesn't come with a explicit character or explicit method that reads a character. All right, so you have to be very careful. Again, one of the common mistakes, people go and say next char. Just because we have all of the other primitive data types doesn't mean that we have the char. We don't have the char. So here, what we will do, the trick we will do is that we will read a string, all right, using the next line, and reference that using name. And then since we just want a single character, we will assume the user entered the right character just as a single character. Now, as we read it, we are reading it as a string, which qualifies, like it's not a character. You cannot go and say, for example, here, char. All right. Sorry. Like char input character. All right. So, and I'm hoping that the user is going to enter just a single character so it can be stored in a char, but this is not going to happen. All right, it's going to complain. It says incompatible type java.lang.string. You're trying to take a string and put it in a char which cannot be converted. All right, so this does not work. So what you have to do is to read it as a string. Now it's a full string, even though it's a single character, it qualifies to be a full string. Then what you do next is that you declare your char variable, and then what you do is that you go and use the string methods, which is char add, and extract the first character, which is indexed by 0, by doing char add 0. So this way you can extract the character from the string and store it in a character. So that's the workaround or the trick to get the character as an input. Then last thing is the input problem that we discussed, and we said that, and this is very common. You will face it, and you need to be aware that whenever you see something like this, you just need to remember that was the mistake. So here you have a string name, you have an int age, and a double income. And what we want to do is that we create our keyboard scanner object, and then we go to prompt the user for the age. All right, and then the annual income. Okay, so if I prompt the user for these two things, okay, there shouldn't be a problem. All right, so here two numbers following each other, that's perfectly fine. Two primitive data types. Then I go and jump here and try to, okay, what is your name? And I try to read that using next line. So let's run it and see what will happen here. So enter your age, let's say 40, and enter your annual income, let's say 70,000. All right, so notice here that it was supposed to prompt me for my name and store that as a string in name. However, this did not happen. It terminated, it stopped running, cannot take any inputs. So age is 40, income is 70,000, and then what is your name? And then it assumes that I entered an empty string or a space. And then it just prints hello and then a space because it assumes that this is my name. And your age is 40 and your income is 70,000. So notice here that this is a problem. This is a problem because it took that empty space and assumed that this is my name, and it's not. So this, as we said, it's the keyboard buffer. The return that you entered after 70,000 was left behind there, and the next line assumed that this is your name. So what you want to do is to exhaust and remove that new line character left behind in the keyboard buffer before you move forward and ask for the name as a string. So now I'm exhausting this using a next line method here. All right, it does nothing. It's not assigned to anything. It's just a line that exhausts that new line character. So I prompt, I go back 40, 70,000, and then now it's asking me for my name. So I can enter Hamza, and then it will say, hello Hamza, your age is 40 and your income is 70,000. All right, so that is the fix of how to do this. Now, one very important note here is that if you have already actually, like if you started with prompting for a name before prompting for the primitive data types, all right, so if I do something like this, you will not actually have the problem. So I could ask the name and then I enter Hamza, 40, 70,000, and done. So you see, it's because even if I remove that key, the next line, compile, let's do it again, Hamza 40, 70,000. All right, so again it works. So it's the order, it's the fact that you prompted the user for a primitive data type and then tried to prompt the user for a string. This is where the problem happens, and that's why you will need to do that dummy next line method.